Hi, welcome to ArkIntel. Imagine a crime so vast, so brazen, that it bled billions from an entire nation. Yet, no one seemed to notice. Picture a criminal mastermind hiding in plain sight, manipulating not just a bank, but the entire financial system of a whole country for over a decade. And now, she faces the ultimate consequence. We are talking about a tycoon so powerful, so untouchable, that no one dared to question her reign. A woman who orchestrated a financial scheme that siphoned over a staggering 3% of her nation's GDP, that is $44 billion. Yet, her crimes weren't committed in secrecy. They were carried out in the public eye, with the system watching, and somehow no one acted. What happens when justice finally catches up with someone who thought they were immune? Stay with us as we unravel the shocking story of how one woman single-handedly destabilized an entire economy until it all came crashing down in the most unexpected way. Vietnam's economy was soaring, becoming one of Southeast Asia's fastest growing markets. As opportunities flourished, so did the ambitions of Trong My Lan. Born in 1956 in Saigon to a modest family, Lan learned the art of negotiation at Ben Thang Market, a bustling hub of traders and vendors. Her childhood in the market taught her how to hustle, but her ambitions reached far beyond simple trade. In the mid-1990s, Lan had ventured into the real estate market, just as Vietnam's reforms were opening the doors for private businesses. She founded Tan Thuan Phat Group, a real estate firm that would soon become one of Vietnam's largest. With a marriage to Hong Kong investor Eric True, Lan's influence expanded even further. Together, they built an empire of restaurants, hotels, and properties, amassing a fortune. But that wasn't enough. By 2010, she had her sights set on the financial sector, and that's when things began to take a dark turn. To provide a more complete understanding of Lan's rise, let's look at the broader context of Vietnam during this period. The country was undergoing rapid economic liberalization, and with it came an influx of foreign investments and significant shifts in wealth. Many tycoons emerged during this time, but few were as ruthless in their ambition as Lan. She saw an opportunity not just to profit from the booming real estate market, but to control the very institutions that held the economy together. Lan's entrance into the banking world marked the beginning of her most audacious move yet. She quietly gained control of Saigon Commercial Bank, SCB, by merging it with three struggling banks, a move that was approved by Vietnam's central bank. At first glance, it appeared to be a legitimate restructuring. However, hidden behind the facade was a scheme that would eventually siphon off $44 billion in fraudulent loans over the course of a decade. This was no simple fraud. Vietnamese law caps an individual's ownership in a bank at 5%, but Lan used an intricate network of shell companies and proxies, allowing her to amass nearly 90% ownership of SCB without raising suspicion. She placed the ownership of the bank's shares under the names of family members and associates, making it appear as though the bank was in healthy hands. But in reality, it was all a front. Every decision, every loan was under Lan's direct control. To understand how this scheme could have gone unnoticed for so long, we have to examine Vietnam's regulatory framework at this time. The financial system was still developing, and oversight was often lax or easily manipulated by those with deep pockets. Lan exploited these weaknesses, knowing that auditors and regulators were either underfunded, untrained, or too intimidated to challenge her empire. From 2012 onwards, she began siphoning funds on an unprecedented scale. By setting up thousands of fake companies, she funneled loans back to herself, her businesses, and her allies. The operation was so well hidden that even major accounting firms like Deloitte and KPMG failed to catch it in their audits. But the rot was setting in, and it was only a matter of time before the cracks started to show. The scale of Lan's fraud is staggering. Over the course of a decade, 93% of the loans approved by SCB, totaling $44 billion, were funneled directly into her own accounts. This amounted to 3% of Vietnam's entire GDP. Her actions not only damaged the bank, but shook the entire financial system of the country. Let's break this down. Every time a customer deposited money into SCB, 93 cents of every dollar were being pocketed by Lan. This meant that her fraudulent activities affected tens of thousands of ordinary Vietnamese citizens, people who trusted the bank with their savings and livelihoods. To put the extent of her deception into further context, imagine if a bank in the United States siphoned off 3% of the national GDP. We are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars being drained from the economy, impacting every single citizen, business, and public service. It's no wonder that Vietnam's financial stability began to wobble under the weight of her greed. As her empire grew, so did her need to maintain control. Between 2012 and 2022, Lan bribed government officials and regulators to keep the scheme under wraps. One of the largest bribes recorded was $5 million to the chief inspector of Vietnam's state bank, Do An, delivered in styrofoam boxes. This bribe was enough to set the inspector's family up for life in a country where top government officials typically earned around $1,000 a month. Even more astonishing was her use of cash. Over a 3-year period, her driver was instructed to withdraw 108 trillion Vietnamese dong, equivalent to $4 billion from SCB, which she stored in her basement. To put this in perspective, moving that amount of cash would weigh nearly 2 tons. This was not just a financial crime, it was an act of arrogance and excess on a scale rarely seen. But as is the case with all grand schemes, Lan's eventually began to unravel. By 2022, Vietnam's anti-corruption crackdown reached its peak. The Communist Party intensified its Blazing Furnace campaign, focusing on cleaning up both public and private sectors. Lan's crimes could no longer be ignored. Her downfall didn't just come from internal pressures. International financial institutions and global markets were beginning to scrutinize Vietnam's financial system more closely. Lan's actions had put Vietnam's economy at risk of losing credibility on the world stage, and the government could no longer protect her. In October 2022, Lan was arrested. The aftermath of her arrest was catastrophic. 42,000 victims were identified. These were ordinary people who had entrusted SCB with their life savings. The government seized over 1,000 of her properties across Vietnam, including high-rise buildings in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. The fallout of her crimes destabilized the real estate market, causing property firms to shut down in record numbers. The trial that followed was nothing short of a spectacle. The court presented 104 boxes of evidence, weighing a total of 6 tons. The sheer volume of evidence shocked the nation, and Lan's claims of innocence did little to sway the court. She insisted that her lack of experience in banking and misunderstanding of the law led to her downfall, but the court wasn't convinced. In April 2024, Lan was sentenced to death for embezzling $12.5 billion, an amount that authorities could prove. However, estimates suggest that she funneled much more than that. To put this into context, $12.5 billion in Vietnam is equivalent to someone in the United States embezzling $763 billion. Her sentencing marked one of the harshest punishments ever given for financial crimes in Vietnam's history. Trong My Lan's case isn't just a story of greed. It's a chilling reminder of the fragility of systems meant to safeguard economies. Her actions not only destroyed her empire, but also left a devastating mark on Vietnam's financial landscape. The Vietnamese government had to inject $24 billion in special loans to prevent a complete collapse of SCB. These funds came from taxpayers, meaning that ordinary citizens who had already lost their savings were being asked to shoulder the burden of bailing out the very bank that had betrayed them. Beyond the immediate financial consequences, Lan's actions have forced Vietnam to rethink its regulatory and legal frameworks. New laws have been proposed to prevent any individual from ever gaining so much control over a financial institution again. But for the 42,000 victims and the nation at large, the scars of this economic betrayal will take years, if not decades, to heal. While her sentencing may have sent a strong message about corruption, many wonder whether it was truly about justice or merely a political move to restore public confidence in the Communist Party. Some even speculate that the death penalty was intended to frighten Lan into returning the remainder of the stolen billions. Yet, regardless of the motivations behind her punishment, one thing is clear: Lan's story is a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition and the consequences of placing power in the wrong hands. Her empire, built on fraud and deceit, crumbled under the weight of its own greed, leaving thousands of victims and a nation questioning how one woman could have done so much damage. Vietnam may recover from the economic shockwaves of this scandal, but it will never forget the name Trong My Lan.